Hello, all. This is Dr. Dave Maslak talking to you about reciprocity.com. The E is written with a 3. And in this particular video, I want to talk about what do you actually learn in a PhD program. So if you don't know me, I'm a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship, and I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There were so many people that helped me out to get through graduate school that I decided to pay the favor forward and help you out as much as I possibly can. So I created this sort of sharing economy proofreading platform. That's what the whole reciprocity thing is all about. But then I'm doing these YouTube videos because there are so many questions that you probably are wondering, but nobody's going to ask or tell you about. So what are the things that you learn during a PhD program? So first of all, this is probably going to be geared a little bit more towards business administrations, just simply because I know that field. But it's going to be very applicable to almost every single field, I think. I'm trained in my undergrad as a chemical engineer. I did my master's in management science. In my, which is very quantitative and whatnot, and then in my PhD, I did strategic management. So there is, I just kind of know the field a little bit more, but it is widely applicable. So what are these 3 things that you're going to learn during your PhD program? So these are kind of the explicit 3 things that people are going to learn in their PhD program. The first one is this theory. So what is that? Often most people don't know what that is. And it's really just explanations of why something works or how something works. And the things that you focus on in business administration is going to be organizations and markets, right? Those are the 2 key things that we really focus on. But if you look at other different fields, if it's chemistry, maybe it's going to be looking at sort of molecular bonds, for example, how they might work. If it's physics, you might be looking at, how, I'm not sure how, how the bodies in space move about, right? It's going to be looking at those kind of things and coming up with some sort of theory of how they all work and function together. And that's really what we try to do. And it's across the board in all sorts of different fields. In economics, it's going to be very similar to that. You're going to be trying to figure out what are the desires, or how do people achieve the desires that they want to achieve, given the limited resources that they actually have, and coming up with different explanations of how that actually works. The second thing that you're going to learn is methods, right? So every sort of scientist, and I view us all as scientists in some sort of degree. We all have sort of, and the reason is we're all contributing to anybody that is going this sort of academic route and thinking about a PhD or going into graduate school. They're contributing to academic knowledge, right? So this knowledge base that we have. Some people sort of have a really distinct line in science. I don't. But the way that I view it is that as long as you're contributing to the knowledge base, then you're probably doing something scientific, right? And so we need methods to sort of explain the world around us a little bit better. So we have these theories, but they need to be either tested to, we don't, so some people say that we try to falsify theories, and there's lots of people that sort of think that, but it doesn't really quite work that way, because theories never disappear in the sense that we can falsify them and sort of remove them from the vernacular and they're just no longer there. They are always there, and there's always a chance that some whacked out theory is going to work. So it's hard to sort of falsify any particular thing. But what we could do is lend greater support or build up a case for one theory or another one, and give that one a little bit more of weight. Right. And that's probably more along the lines of what methods are for, is you're trying to build up a case to say that this particular idea is a little bit better than this particular idea. It's not that this one can be totally disqualified or removed, because there might be particular use cases where this one actually works really well. And this one over here doesn't, it works somewhat okay. And so that happens a lot. And that's the way that I personally think about them. And you just have to find the cases where it works really spectacularly well for this certain theory that you actually have. And that's kind of how we think about it, right? And how it actually might sort of develop. And that's why you need methods, to sort of show under this particular context, this is how this particular theory might work or might be explained a little bit better. And we have all sorts of different kinds of methodological things. A lot of people think that science is all about experiments. That's not really, that's only a limited way of doing sort of science. But you also do things like look at mass amounts of data. In every field, we'll look at that. We do things like interview people, right? Even in other fields that you might sort of not expect, you might interview economists, for example, and get their particular opinion or thoughts on a particular thing. And sometimes that gives a lot of insight onto something. And that's why, and we sort of look at these kind of different methods, and some of them work better than others. And in terms of people, sometimes I got an itchy nose. I'm gonna kiss a fool, as my mom always says. So sometimes what you're going to do if you are studying people, you might actually, and in some fields it's a little bit, we have different flavors or preferences of what sort of methods are appropriate. And, one of them might be just going and studying people, right? And actually living with people and sort of getting them to do certain things or just interacting with them. Sometimes that's a really valid way, and you get some really cool insights with that. So in business administration, we're pretty open in terms of the approaches you choose and all that kind of stuff. And there's not one particular good way, although that there are standards, and, that there are, it's hard to sort of choose one that's better than the other. And then the third thing that you're going to look at, so we got theory, methods, and then the last one is sort of the philosophy of science. And this is, you're actually going to spend a fair bit of time sort of thinking about like how science actually works and what it's about and the nature of science. It's kind of interesting stuff. I always really found this most fascinating because you sort of get down into philosophy of how the world actually works, and you can ask all sorts of deep questions about the nature of world around us and how we might study science. The way that we understand science, it's constantly changing, right? It's always changing. It's evolving. Year after year, there's something new and exciting that's happening. The one thing since I've been around, there's been sort of a number of different things, but a key thing that's been changing in the last few years is this idea of replication. We had this idea for years, right, that you should be able to replicate and sort of validate your findings, but virtually nobody did it. And now it's becoming a bigger thing in all fields that we have to replicate this kind of stuff. And the reason why nobody did it is we thought that the studies were sound enough that they didn't need to be redone. But it turns out that for all sorts of different reasons, contextual conditions, each investigator, for example, has sort of different ways of doing the experiment. Maybe it's the temperature, or maybe it's just the environment you're in are different. There's all sorts of sort of funky reasons that sort of change the results of every study that is done. And if you've ever done this, actually, this is really fun. I remember doing this in my chemical engineering labs. Everybody would do the exact same experiments, and we all got different results. Right, like there was probably 30 different people that were all doing the same lab experiments, and it was tightly controlled, in this really nice lab environment, doing something very simple, like stuff with ideal gas laws that are really, really easy. Maybe it's titrating something. We all got different results. Nobody got in exactly the same result. They clustered around something, and so if you just do one experiment or one study, you're going to get many different results. And so that's why we have to sort of talk about the philosophy of science, what it means to sort of figure out what knowledge is. That's a really difficult thing to put your finger on, and all these kind of different ideas that are out there in terms of understanding the validity and reliability of science. And that's even putting constraints on it, because I know that there's some people would not even think about that there is, a right or real science or real knowledge that's out there. So what is it? So these things are the three sort of broad things that you're going to be learning about during a PhD, but there are many different important implicit things that you learn during your PhD that are not told or not They're more learnt sort of experientially, and it's stuff that I think is the most valuable in terms of how you're actually going to view the world and what's going to happen to you. So the first one is dedication and persistence. So hey, if you want to learn about persisting and what it takes to actually do really rigorous work, then do a PhD. It actually takes a lot of effort, and it's very, very competitive. You have to push yourself really, really hard to keep going with a particular idea. And you might think, oh yeah, these experiments, oh, yeah, they take a couple of months. No. You're over, years and years and years. You're dedicating yourself to one particular idea. And that takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. And a lot of people have to stay focused on that. And the vast majority of the people can't do that. The vast majority of the people that even start the PhD find it really difficult to do that. And even people that are famous, you talk to them and they say that that's a really difficult thing that you have to learn to deal with. And that's just what you have to do. And that's kind of the nature of doing science and doing a PhD or becoming a professor, for example, is just learning this dedication and persistence. And some people learn it over the course of doing it, and some people have it naturally, right? So it's kind of like a trait, and it's also, it's kind of learned at the same time. But you do learn about dedication and persistence to something, and it is really tricky. That's one of the most tricky things. And the second really tricky thing that you learn about is learning how to cope with uncertainty. So nobody gives you the right way of doing something when you're doing a PhD or you're doing research in any sort of way. There isn't a right way at all. They're not going to say, this is the way that you do things. So that's the fundamental difference between maybe it's getting, a regular job or maybe an undergraduate degree. They're going to tell you this is what the answer is. It's not like that at all. During a PhD, it's like, here, you go find it. And then you got to go out and find it. And you got to go out and do that. It's just like, go, you do that. And then that's it, right? Like, so you just kind of are like, and there's even sort of degrees of that, right? So when you start out with your PhD program, somebody might give you a question to go study. We might say, oh, go study this. It's kind of interesting. Go study it and toil away. But, once you get along in the program and you sort of develop this skill, we expect you and other, professors expect you to go up and say, no, I wonder about this. I wonder how this actually works. I'm going to actually go study that. And once you can do that and say, well, I wonder, and I'm going to go do that. And once you're capable of doing that, that's when you've kind of made it and you've figured this whole thing out. And if you could do that, that's wonderful. A lot of people actually never learn how to do that and develop that particular skill. So those two kind of things, to ask questions and actually go do it, that's hard to do that. Believe it or not, like it's really, really tricky to do that kind of stuff. So, and because the reason is it's really, really uncertain. You don't know whether the thing that you're doing is right. You don't know if you're doing anything that's possibly remotely in the direction that you should be going. And sometimes you'll end up spending like 6 months pursuing one particular direction. And you're like, crap, that didn't work out. And so you wasted all this time for 6 months, and then you got to go back and redo it again. Or do something else, right? Like that happens a lot. Like, believe me, it happens all the time. And so you have to figure out how to cope with that. And the uncertainty is it's just not knowing what to do next and knowing what the right answer is. That's a struggle, and most people can't deal with that. And that's really why the dedication and persistence are super important along the way. And that's why I'm doing these YouTube videos, by the way. It kind of helps you out. There's other people that are out in the world kind of going through all of these experiences just like you. All right. And the third thing that you learn, and this is pretty important, but not terribly important, but you do learn about the social structure of academia. Every organization is different, and every sort of career field is different. And in academia, it's different there as well. So that we've got kind of the way it kind of works is kind of got like some old world stuff from way back in the sort of monks kind of age, right? When they, the whole idea of universities was started. And we also have kind of new world stuff where we're trying to keep up with new technology. And so those two fields and two sort of norms and stuff are constantly clashing in how they work. And so we've got interesting ideas to ensure that that actually works. And then it is a little bit of a club, I guess, but in a good way, in the sense that people are always looking out for other people, making sure that they're doing kind of the right thing that they should be doing, however you might classify what the right thing should be. And so that's the debate goes, and the sort of tricky part is figuring out what is the right thing to do, right? So you're given this time and effort to sort of explore the things that you want to explore, or the time and resources to do that. And that's a really wonderful thing. So the state, the government just gives you a bunch of money basically and says, here, go and study whatever you want to study. And there's a clash between what is right in terms of the right thing that you should be studying. So that's the thing that you should be thinking about. And the last thing is, this is the most important thing that you learn. You learn about who you are and what you want to do with your life. This is a time, and one of the people that I work closely with, he always said that this is, doing a PhD is very decadent, in the sense that what you're doing is doing whatever you want to do, and you can dedicate the resources that you have at hand to anything that you possibly want to do. And so you have to be true to yourself. You have to figure out what's going on right in there, right in your heart. And right up here, trying to figure out if you're listening to your heart and figuring out where you should go next. And that's a really important thing that you do learn. It's hard. You never know if you actually are listening to your heart, and whether it's the right possible thing that you're doing. But you have to do that. That's how you actually keep going with this career, is listen to what you're all about. And coming back to who you are as an individual is going to keep you going forward. It's going to keep you grounded and allow you to make the decisions that you should make. All right. So if you like this video, I talked about what are the sort of basic things you learn during a PhD program. I also talked about the different sort of implicit or things that you learn that nobody ever tells you that you're actually going to learn. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. Do subscribe to the YouTube channel. I do appreciate it. Take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.